He snapped his fingers for the bill and said two words that froze the entire restaurant, words he was certain no one around him could understand. He didn't know the woman standing beside his table had spent her whole life learning how to turn words into weapons, bridges, and miracles. And when she finally looked him in the eye and answered him fluently, the billionaire realized something far more terrifying than being overheard. He had just underestimated the one person who could dismantle him without raising her voice. The restaurant was the kind of place people used to prove things: polished marble floors, quiet music that pretended to be humble, and menus that didn't list prices. Lena worked there 6 nights a week, balancing plates heavier than her own worries, memorizing faces that never bothered to remember hers. To most guests, she was invisible in the safest way: polite smile, neutral tone, eyes lowered just enough to avoid confrontation. Lena had learned early that invisibility could be a form of survival. Her father had taught her languages the way other parents taught their children to throw a ball. Spanish at breakfast, French on evening walks, Arabic whispered like secrets when money ran low and neighbors listened too closely. Later came Mandarin from borrowed tapes, German from an old woman who traded lessons for groceries, and English polished until it could pass anywhere without an accent. Words were the only inheritance her parents could afford, and Lena carried them carefully. That night, the men at table 12 arrived like a storm with tailored edges. Victor Hale, everyone in the city knew the name even if they pretended not to care. Billionaire. Tech empire. Headlines that followed him like shadows. He didn't look around when he sat, didn't acknowledge the host, didn't thank Lena when she poured his water. He spoke loudly, confidently, as if the room were an extension of his boardroom. From the start, nothing was right. The water was too cold. The menu was outdated. The lighting was wrong. Lena absorbed the complaints the way she had absorbed worse things in life, quietly, professionally, with a practiced calm that hid the tightening in her chest. She reminded herself this was temporary, that she was saving for something better, that dignity could be stored away for later. Victor took a call midway through his meal, switching languages as easily as he switched forks. He laughed, leaning back, speaking in a sharp mix of German and Mandarin. Lena understood every word. He joked about employees being replaceable, about cities being bought and sold, about people who served him being interchangeable parts of the same dull machine. His voice dropped, smug and amused, when he said something cruel about the waitress hovering nearby, about how she wouldn't understand anyway. Lena's hands trembled just once as she placed his plate down. She kept her face neutral. Years of restraint pressed against her ribs. She told herself to walk away. She told herself rent was due. She told herself silence was safer. Then Victor snapped his fingers and muttered the words that changed everything. Translate this, he said softly, switching to Arabic, confident and careless. He insulted the restaurant, the staff, and her specifically, laughing under his breath as if language itself were a private club she could never enter. Lena straightened. The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter, as if waiting. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't drop the plate. She simply looked at him and replied in flawless Arabic, translating his insult word for word, then adding something of her own, measured, precise, and devastatingly calm. She explained the cultural weight of each phrase, the history behind the words he'd misused, and the irony of a man so wealthy still being so poor in character. The table went silent. Victor's smile faltered for the first time that evening. People were watching now. Lena could feel it. She could feel the old fear too, but beneath it was something stronger, a sense of alignment, as if every language she'd ever learned had led her to this exact moment. Victor laughed awkwardly, brushing it off, but his eyes had changed. He paid quickly and left without another word. The restaurant buzzed after he was gone, whispers rippling from table to table. Lena returned to work, heart racing, unsure whether she'd just ruined her job or reclaimed something far more important. What she didn't know was that Victor Hale hated losing, and he never forgot a challenge. The call came 3 days later. Lena almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Polite voice on the other end asking if she was the waitress from the restaurant. Her stomach tightened. She expected a complaint, maybe a threat, maybe nothing at all. Instead, she was invited to a meeting. Victor Hale wanted to see her. The building was glass and steel, cold in a way that tried to pass for modern. Lena wore her best clothes, hands folded, mind racing through every possible outcome. She reminded herself she owed him nothing, not her fear, not her apology. Victor was different in daylight. Less theatrical, more calculating. He didn't ask her to sit right away. He studied her, as if trying to translate her instead. I looked you up, he said finally. Or tried to. There's nothing there. Lena met his gaze. People like me don't usually leave trails. He smirked, then sighed. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself, she replied evenly. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Victor surprised her. He admitted he'd underestimated her. He admitted he used languages like accessories, trophies to show off intelligence he'd never bothered to deepen. He had a problem, he said, a global deal collapsing because no one on his team truly understood the cultural nuance involved. Contracts were failing, trust was broken, and money couldn't fix it. He needed someone who could listen as well as speak. Lena felt the old instinct to say no, to protect herself by staying small. But she also felt something else, the weight of all those lessons, all those nights translating dreams she was told were unrealistic. I won't work for someone who looks down on people, she said. And I won't be silent to make you comfortable. Victor nodded slowly. Then don't be. The months that followed were not easy. Lena challenged executives twice her age. She corrected translations that could have caused international offenses. She explained that language was not just words but memory, pain, pride, and history. She walked away from meetings when she was disrespected. And slowly, things changed. Victor listened. Not because he was suddenly kind, but because he finally understood value beyond numbers. The deal succeeded, not because of power or money, but because someone had taken the time to truly translate intention. On her last day at the restaurant, Lena folded her apron carefully and left it on the counter. She didn't look back. She carried with her the quiet certainty that her voice mattered. Months later, Victor stood on a stage, speaking about global responsibility. He paused, glanced toward Lena in the audience, and said something in Arabic, this time carefully, respectfully, correctly. He translated it himself, admitting he'd once believed language was a tool for dominance, until a waitress taught him it was a mirror. The room applauded. Lena smiled, not because he'd changed, but because she had never needed him to. She had translated herself into a life that finally fit. ENDMESSAGE. Never assume silence means ignorance. Some people are quiet because they are fluent in patience, strength, and truth, and when they finally speak, the world has no choice but to listen.